Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So in our last video, I had talked about some steps and goals for the students in the course, which is ultimately to work towards being able to read without the vowel markings, or what is known as the tashkīl. And one of the necessary skills, you could say then, that the student needs to acquire is the ability to differentiate between types of words, like is this a verb, is this a noun, is this a particle, like, between asma, af'al, and huruf. But then also to be able to say, particularly within the context of af'al or the context of verbs, ahuwa fi'lun madi, right? Is it a past tense verb, right? Fi'l mudari'. Is it a present tense verb and in the command and the active, the passive, right? So these will be the things that we're going to work on in a modular sense to help the student develop not only a familiarity but an intuition when it comes to being able to read the Arabic language. So one of the things that I spoke about was creating a lot of example sentences and paragraphs to read. So we're going to take a look at them to explore the alamatul fi'l al-madi, right? To explore the signs of what constitutes a past tense verb. فقرات وجمل أمثلة. By looking at some little short paragraphs and sentences. Initially, we're just going to look at some sentences, and then in the next video, and also in the handout for class, we'll go over some of the paragraphs. Okay. So, I have here 10 example short sentences, and in each one, it will showcase a past tense verb, how it's being used, and how we can look for the sign of its gender, the sign that it is a past tense verb, and so forth. So let's look at number one. ابتدأت الطالبة الكتابة من الصفحة الأولى. So you'll notice that I read this particular sentence, which begins with a past tense verb. So the verb, as we saw it in our reading of the Risala by Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, is the verb ibtada'a. But as you can see here, our verb ibtada'a has a ta on it. And yet the word that comes right after it is at-taliba. At-taliba, the female student. So that we can see the ta'un marbuta, which we talked about, that is the sign of femininity. Then this gives us a clue for a couple of things. In our verb here, and we mentioned in the previous video, by having the ta on the end of the verb, it could be read essentially four different ways. Ibtada'tu, ibtada'ta, ibtada'ti, and ibtada'at, with the sukoon. And each of those corresponds to what? I began, you began male, you began female, and she began. So though there is no voweling on it, look at the context of the sentence. If it is, as we said, ibtada'tu, I began, so then let's look at how could this possibly be ibtada'tu? How could this be I have begun? So if we look at the rest of the sentence, ignoring the first two words, we have the word al-kitab, we have the harf jar, or the particle min, and then we have the noun and its adjective al-safha and al-ula, meaning what? The page and first, or the first page. So how would this sentence possibly refer to myself if we go with al-kitab min as-safhat al-ula, right? The book from the first page. If it was I began the book from the first page, then what is at-taliba, right? It doesn't make any sense. Likewise, if it were to be ibtada'ta, you began. If I'm talking to you and you are the mukhatib, then how could this make any sense with you being the mukhatib again, to justify the presence of the word at-taliba. It simply doesn't make any sense. And likewise, if it was ibtida'ti, because that's simply the mukhatiba, that is simply the mu'annath, the feminine of second person. In the light that it was ibtada'at, she began, well, certainly, right? Ibtada'at and at-taliba. So at-taliba is a female student, referring to the female student as the ghaiba, right? The third person, who is somebody not there that we're talking about or is being referenced in the sentence, absolutely does make sense. And so the ta on the end of ibtada'a is indeed the ta of mu'annath. It is the ta of femininity, but it is for what? Al-ghaiba. It's for the person in the absence or in the third person. Now, let's take a look here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. As you heard me read the sentence, I said, ibtada'at talibatul kitaba. So let's mark things here temporarily a little bit with our vowels. So normally we said when it is a third person feminine, right, al-ghaiba, then the fi'l madi, right, it what? Yantahi bi ta sakin. It ends with a ta that has a sukoon on it. But because the word that follows it is a definitive noun, it has the alif and it has the lam, then we have to make a wasla, we have to make a connection. Now this is not often done in common speech. Many people would simply say ibtada'at at-talibatu al-kitaba. But as you know, that this is for what? Ad-dirasa, at-ta'abbudiyya. This is for devotional studies. And so this would apply to, for instance, the ahkam of tajweed or the rules of tajweed, where we have to connect sounds to each other. So when you have a ghaiba, fi'l madi, ghaiba, you have a past tense noun that is third person feminine singular, but the word that follows it is a definitive noun that begins with the alif and the lam, then you have to connect it by adding a kasra to the ta. So in reality, if we want to come here for a second and do away with this, right, what we really are dealing with is this. There is a sukoon that's there. However, what we are truthfully dealing with, because of this grammar rule, is that we have to obey that and put the kasra. So ibtada'at talibatu at-taliba. Most of you should remember that ta is one of the huruf shamsiyya, it's one of the sun letters, and it has to take a shadda. And because at-taliba, which is the female student, she is the subject of our sentence, then the ending is going to be a dhamma, which is the sign of subjectivity. And we have to apply that to the word. So ibtada'at talibatul al-kitaba. Al-kitaba. Why al-kitaba? Likewise, we have our wasla. So likewise, we have our wasla. We must carry the sound of the dhamma on the ta'un marbuta over to the kaf. So al-talibatul kitab. And it is al-kitaba. Why? Because it is the direct object. It is receiving the action of ibtada'a. It is receiving the action of ibtada'at. And then the rest of the sentence is as we have conventionally read it, which is what? Min as-safhatil ula. The last thing just to comment on here, al-ula is mu'annath of awwal. Awwal. So awwal is first, masculine, and ula is the feminine. Okay, so let's now go to number 2. Number 2 begins with ibtada'a, and there's nothing added before or after our verb, so we can easily agree that this is fi'l madin. It is a past tense verb, وهو مذكر, that it is masculine, وهو مفرد, and that it is also singular. So that one's straight up. But what about our second word here, which you might say, well, I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know, there's no vowels on it. And that is true, but in our vocabulary for this reading, you will find as part of the vocab for the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, we did have a verb that is this one. Allama. Allama. Now, allama means to teach. And so, if we wanted to read this as ma'lam, which is very odd, or mu'lam, so we could either read it as a ma'lam with a fatha, or we could read it as a mu'lam, right? We could read it as such, but it doesn't really make a tremendous amount of sense, right, if we were to read it that way. So let's get that out of there and go back to what we have. And so if we wanted to preserve the same form that we have here in our past tense verb, allama, so let's take what we do know about that and apply it to our word. We know that there is a shadda. So we don't know what the first two vowels are going to be, but we do know it's a shadda. So to give you a little bit to go with, this form here, allama, its present tense form is yu'allimu. Yu'allimu. So if we actually take the first vowel in yu'allimu, the dhamma, let's put that on our meme. Second is we want to say, well, what's now going to go on our ayn? Now here, the second sound is in fatha. So if it were, then what we would either have would be either mu'allam, mu'allum, or mu'allim. But it's not going to be that, because number one, what would be a mu'allam? So we said the mu'allam would actually be the passive, the ism maf'ul. It would be kind of the passive way of saying that it is the thing that has been taught. It is the thing that has been instructed. So we're going to do away with that because, again, connecting that to he began. So he began what was taught. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So if it is the Dhamma, mu'allum, this would be a very odd, very, very strange inflection. So that doesn't fit our bill whatsoever. And then if it is a kasra, mu'allim. Now look at, we're taking the same vowel that is over here in our present tense conjugation, and we are putting it here on our lam. So what we get is mu'allim. Now this meme here, it is what we had called what? It is a harf za'id. It's not part of the root. It's added to the word itself. And the function of this meme, in many words, it's either going to be a meme of a fa'il, like a person that does something, or a meme of makan, a meme where something is done or where something takes place. So in the case of our meme of makan, let's give an example of a word that we'll be very familiar with, like masjid, because that's the place where prostration, where sajda takes place. So, long story short, what we are left with is a word called mu'allim. Mu'allim, the one that does allama, the one that does teaching, or a teacher. Because the other thing that we have to consider in our word choice is not only what we begin with in terms of our verb, but we also have to consider, well, what is the third word in the sentence? Ad-dars. So it seems to make sense that what we have here is a verb, a subject, and an object. We have a verb of he started, a subject of the teacher, the male teacher, and what did the teacher start? Ad-dars, right? Started the lesson. Which then tells us, as we said before, in our last, or rather in our previous example, we said that al-kitab is the direct object, and so it's going to take a fatha. Same thing here, because ad-dars is the direct object. And remembering again, dal is one of the sun letters. B is what? Harf jar. It's a particle of possession. So it's going to assign the state of possession or majroor to whatever it governs. And so it's going to govern the first word here, which is shar. So B, shar, he, المقدمة. So ابتدأ المعلم الدرس بشرح المقدمة. The teacher, the male teacher, began the lesson by explaining the introduction. So as I mentioned, both I think in this video and in the previous one, like the thing that's going to direct you is context, so that you don't have to feel lost, but rather look at everything surrounding you that will give you the clues of how to make which choices or determinations on what rulings to apply. So let's take it number 3. We have our sentence again, beginning with ibtada'a, except this time we have a na attached to it. So the na here is the jama'. It is the suffix of plurality, but it's the jama' of the mutakallim. It's the jama' of the mutakallim, which is what? The person speaking first person, except that it is plural, so it's we. Versus ana, which is I, it's nahnu, or the suffix of noon, alif, na, it's we. So we began. What did we begin? A mashru'. What is the word mashru'? If you look in your vocab, right, it means a project. So it is going to be the direct recipient of the action of ibtada'a. So it is the direct object, and so what is our marking? The fatha. ابتدأنا المشروع مع, like our ba above is harf jar. So the word it will govern will be majroor or possessed, and it will take a, so in this case, the word al-masajid, which is the plural of masjid, will get our kasra. And then the word that follows al-masajid is going to be an adjective. And the clue is the shadda, particularly the second, not the first, the second shadda there is a sign of it. But also, generally speaking, it would make sense. So what does this word, this is a new one. This is the word for local. So mahalli, when it is mudhakkar, and muhalliya, when it is mu'annath, when it is feminine. So because masajid is a broken plural, masjid is a masculine word, but masajid is feminine. That's a rule, right? So when you have a single, take for instance the word kitab. Kitab is mufrad, singular, وكذلك مذكر. So kitab is it's a single noun and is also masculine. ولكن جمعه, its plural is what? Kutub. And so it becomes a broken plural. I mean, it breaks the form. And so any adjectives describing it and any nouns acting as the agent of its agency have to be conjugated then in the feminine. So that's why here we have mahalliya. So we began the project with what? The local masajid. ابتدأنا المشروع من المساجد المحلية. And then to change up the verb once more, and I'll post all of these sentences online for you to look at, is now we have abraza. except once again, we have our ta on the end. We have to choose between, as we said, what? First person, abraztu. We have to choose between second person, the mukhatib, what? Abrazta or abrazti. And then between the third person, mu'annath, what? Abrazat. What is the word that follows? It is a feminine noun. It is the feminine of ustadh. And our ta'un marbuta tells us that it is a feminine noun. So it is al-ustadha. Therefore, like our first sentence of here, in which we had ibtada'it talibatu, because of the wasla, we said what? When we have that rule, you have the feminine, singular, third person, past tense, but the word that follows is a definitive noun. You have to make wasla, and so normally our sukun on the ta, but because of the rule of wasla, we have to put a kasra there. So what we're left with is أبرزت الأستاذة مواهبها في القراءة والتجويد. So it's the female professor that showed her talents. That is the word here, mawahib. And what? Fi is another harf jar. And so we already know what the governing ḥarakāt will be. في القراءة والتجويد. So she showcased her talents in reciting the Quran and in tajweed, in qira'ah and in tajweed. So you can check out the rest of the PDF. I'm going to upload this to the website and go through based upon these 4 examples of what we covered and see if you're able to fill in the blanks, so to speak, and you can apply the right ending, so to speak, masculine, feminine, right, first, second, third person, singular, plural, and see if you can line them up, as well as some of the other grammar rules. And of course, you can either hit us up on the Discord or just leave a comment in the video section if you have any questions.